Reclaiming Timeless Ways. Mike Traster, Simon Fuller, glad to have you aboard for episode number 60. A lot of shows, Mike.
A lot of shows. Kind of mind-boggling. We were talking, you talked about this at number 51,
Yep.
right? And now we're 10 beyond that.
Yeah, so what, another 20 weeks deeper into
Right.
our adventure?
Right, because Simon releases one every, you never get them early parole, do you? They always go out every 2 weeks.
About every 2 weeks, yeah.
So 60, that would be 120 weeks worth.
Yeah.
Wow.
Think about that.
It's 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And I'm still fishing for information,
And a lot of our topics circle back
They have
to
to.
other themes, but
Right.
it might just be another example that you saw in life happening or a situation where then that adds some depth to the topic. And today we're gonna do some more of that, Mike. We're gonna start with the topic and hopefully add some depth.
So the subject that I wrote down, and I just added 3 question marks, should probably be 33 question marks, is the limits of, government, management, and bureaucracy.
Oh boy. Well, how long you don't have very much written on that page, but those 3 words
Not much.
could add about 2, 3, 4, 6-hour segment. That's how long we're going.
Yeah, and I
The
guess,
limits of.
So the first question that comes to mind, it's like you hear that sentence and you go, how are people going to react to that sentence?
Yeah.
What does that mean? What's their gut reaction to that sentence?
I honestly,
Yeah.
if you're being honest with
Right,
yourself,
right.
take the parties out of this for a second. Forget
Yeah, right,
if you're
right.
Democratic, Republican, left, right, conservative, moderate. Forget a Green Party, whatever. Forget about your party affiliation. All that does, in my mind, is muddies the water.
You can't.
The party of the party affiliation. If you say no matter what, I believe this because that's what my party believes, even when you don't. That's where it can muddy it. But if you just strip that down and say, truly, myself as a human, government, management, bureaucracy, the limits of. I think almost universally, certainly majority of the people would say, we've already passed them. We've crossed the limits. How many times? Passed the limits. Overstepped the limits, however you want to phrase that.
So when you say that, what I hear you say is they have passed the legitimacy of their authority.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay. I want to make sure.
I'm not saying nothing good still comes today, but those boundaries have been overstepped a
So,
lot.
so we're saying that they take license and they abuse their authority.
I think at times, I don't want that to be a blanket statement that means nothing that they've done is good. But yeah, if you were to say, well, do you agree with that or not, Simon? If you were to point blank me that question, I'd say, yeah, I think so, personally.
So I'll drive it one step further. And without saying always or never, which are dysfunctional words as a rule, I would say an unacceptably frequent amount of time, the government, management, and bureaucracies are outrageously abusive of the authority that they legitimately have.
I would agree.
That they exceed it, and in doing so, they harm people. And it's done with indifference, with corruption, and with malice.
Absolutely, and that's why I say take the parties out of it.
Right.
Because let's pretend I am left wing, you're right wing, Mike.
Right.
We could both jump on our phones, if you
Right.
don't already have it in your memory bank, and find hundreds, if not thousands, of examples to prove that to be true against one another's party, correct?
Right.
So therefore, we do have something in common. Maybe we don't share the same party affiliation,
Right.
but if we strip that away and say, who cares who we are today? I'm going to find a bunch of infractions against yours, you against mine. We have something in common, Both have a lot of infractions, which goes back to the core question that you asked me.
There was a term I heard in a movie, if I remember right, once, and it was, the tick is dug in deep.
Yeah.
Well, shit. You know, you think about all these people in government. Now, I've met some people in our local government who
A lot
I
of great
like,
ones, absolutely.
Really, really like. They're very honest, they're very decent, they care, and if there's a problem, they want to help.
Right.
But not everybody.
No, sure.
There's some vegetables in there, and it's like the tick is dug in. They're in their position, they're comfortable, they got all their purrs and this and that, which the average human being does not get, right? They're entitled,
Right.
and they don't do a very good job.
Right.
You know, and you say, wow, you know, like you're the manager of a city. I'm not focusing on this city's manager, just a general concept. Or you run a safety department,
Right.
and you know. Or
And
what-
there's too much in all those examples of, oh, is it good for me?
Right.
Okay, then we'll do it.
Right.
And maybe if I get some benefit
Right.
off it, great, but it
Right.
wasn't done with me in mind. It was done with that individual's best interests in mind, all too often.
Right. So
Not
they're
always.
So they're not serving.
Right.
So I have
Sure
a
they are, they're self-serving.
self-serve. Bingo. So I came up with this idea years ago, kind of extrapolated it from something else, and that was, in order to lead, you must first and foremost serve.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you cease to serve, you are no longer a legitimate leader.
I would agree with that, and you know, I do have a religious. I am religious.
Right.
I am Christian, and that is the core of Jesus. Is it not?
Yeah.
Is it
Right.
not what he called disciples to do?
Right.
Is that not how many lessons he taught and parables he spoken, talking about that, in that the
Honesty.
essence of that, the spirit of what you just said?
Yeah, and then interesting. The next, you can't read my page. I don't. The next sentence is: we cut God out of the equation and make the boss or the bureaucrat or the company the final arbiter of truth. So we become liars to assure our security.
And I get that. I'm not agreeing with it, but I can say we understand. I've done it.
Right.
You've done it. We've all cut a corner that
Oh, yeah.
we later, and we have to live with that, where we said, Simon, I wish you wouldn't have done that, man. You sacrificed your belief for, you self-served.
Right.
I'm not pointing a finger or taking the sliver out of their eye without pulling the log out of mine, as scripture would indicate. It's one of those almost innate pieces of
It's
humankind,
taught early and taught continuously.
and it's up to us to consciously,
Reject that.
yeah.
Right.
And that's hard, because you're right, Mike. It threatens our financial status, our career, our marital status, our friendships, our family.
And something that occurred to me about a year ago, and I've said it on one of our programs, the more in debt you are, the less capable you are of acting
I would agree.
honorably.
Because especially as it relates to your career, if there's anything that then is going to rub against your career, you're always going to lean in favor of what the path is of the company you work for.
I was working for a collection agency a number of years ago. This is in Seattle, big collection agency. And they put a whole bunch of clients in a box of cards on my desk. And each one has a different debt. So you have to find them, which sometimes is difficult, and collect the debt, if you can. So I get this one guy. He lived somewhere up in Alaska. And he was just gone. He had disappeared. And I figured out a way to find him. And without lying, you know. And I found him. And In the process of finding him, I found the guy who was his attorney. And I contacted his attorney, who was a judge. And he said to me, "This is not a legal debt." And I said, "Can you explain that to me?" You know? And he said, "Yes, I can." He said it was discharged in a legal bankruptcy. The debt is no longer lawful, can't be collected. It's been stricken. There's no way for it to become a legal debt again, ever. I'm like, oh, okay. So I go up to my boss, and I explain the circumstance to him. And he had a cigarette hanging off his top lip like this. Like one of these cartoon characters, just Mutt and Jeff, you know. And I explain it to him, and he looks at me and he goes, $29,000 was, right? I still remember it. Collect the debt anyway. I looked at him, and I said, "You don't understand.
Yeah, how?
It isn't a debt. It's not legal for us. We're not even able to recontact this man." He's like, "Collect the debt." I said, "You don't get it. It isn't a debt. It's not a debt. It's wiped clean, right? The only way it could ever be a debt again is if the debtor, the previous debtor, wrote a letter reacquiring responsibility.
Right.
Other than that, if he asserted that he was responsible and that he wanted to pay it, other than that, there was no way it could be made a debt.
Right.
I said, "This is not legal. I can't. I won't." So next thing I know, my desk is empty. There's like no more clients. There's no more accounts. And the people in the office are furious with me. I'm starting to get some pretty hostile remarks made my way. And I went to the Attorney General of the state. And I explained to them in detail, in writing, what was going on. So I lost my job. I finally had to take them to court and recover some of my earnings, which I did. One of the people in the office finally came up to me one day and he goes, "You know, I really didn't like you." He goes, I had to change my mind. He said, "You, very honest." He said, "That was a very honorable thing that you did." And there was another one, very aggressive. Wow, so aggressive. It was like they were like predators, you know? And it was expensive. Doing the right thing is expensive.
Yeah.
But I think in the long run, doing the wrong thing is much more expensive.
Sure it is.
Because we are living in this lake, if you will, and we're swimming in it, and our mothers and fathers and our brothers and sisters and spouses and friends and children are swimming in it. And if we're dishonest severely enough, frequently enough, the lake turns into a cesspool.
Just keeps polluting little bit by little bit.
And it becomes deadly.
Yeah.
And somebody who we love will be harmed by it. So, anyway, I don't know. Where do you go from that? It's very difficult. And everybody goes, "Well, I'll just get lucky." It's kind of like Russian roulette. It'll happen to somebody else's kid, but not mine. Or somebody else's mother, not mine. And then maybe they get lucky for a while, but not forever. Meanwhile, inside, we become like cesspools too. You know, we become ugly. And it's like, do we want to have a relationship with ourselves or not?
Right.
You know?
So maybe you do disagree with the opening comments or remarks, opinions on what the limits are with regards to
Right.
government, bureaucrats, et cetera, managers, ownership, companies, however you want to phrase it. But there are limits. You have limits watching, whatever they are. Maybe you don't agree with our statements, but they are. Are you compromising them, is what you're saying.
Right.
Are you seeing Are you seeing somebody, maybe it's a local business, overstepping their limits of knowledge
Right.
for the customer who doesn't have the knowledge and screwing them over? Maybe you see someone overstepping the limits in a religious situation. If you see somebody, what do you do is what you're at, what you're really, that's kind of what you're putting on our hearts and our minds, Mike. Are you seeing these limits being overstepped? And are you doing nothing, or are you going to do something?
Somebody told me once, this is kind of a metaphor. He said, you know what the most destructive thing to large bridges is? And I said, no. He said, pigeons. So what are you talking about? He goes, pigeons nest on the structural steel, and that's where they defecate
Right.
and urinate. And eventually, the steel breaks down and the bridge becomes structurally compromised. Structurally, morally, structurally. So your moral compromise today, or my moral compromise today, will injure my loved ones tomorrow, or yours, right? Don't crap in the pond you swim in, because the loved ones are going to get poisoned.
Or the
by it.
steel that holds up your foundational bridge. I like that. It's just, maybe it's not when you're driving over it, Mike, but somebody will eventually drive over it when it's deteriorated enough and collapses.
Yeah, and it's like, so think of each one of those little plops like a lie.
Right.
And eventually, or a compromise,
Right.
you know. So, oh no, the doctor is wonderful. He's the doctor.
Right.
It's like, what does that have to do with what I just told you about?
Right.
Well, maybe you'd like to go somewhere else. I'm busy. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, so we don't stand up because we are afraid of short-term losses.
Yeah.
And then short-term losses become something much more severe,
Right.
you know? And that's the thing. We don't want to think about that.
Yeah.
You know, we absolutely don't want to think about it. More interesting topics to come. Can I give them a quick hint?
A little teaser, you bet,
Yeah.
of what's to come.
News. What is the news?
Oh,
What-
boy.
What isn't the news?
Better not even start answering that one.
No, that's for next time.
Not much of it. I'll say that. Until next time, enjoy your day. Thank you again.
Thank you.
If there's anything positive you gathered from the show, we always ask you pass it forward. That is the mantra of what we're doing, Mike. Have a great day.
Take care.